All right, we are back. I think it's working now.
I am Sam. Is everyone able to hear me? Is anyone on chat able to confirm? The chat open? Oh no.
All right, we are back. I think it's working now.
I
Okay, yeah. I just checked the stream. You're audible. Okay, cool, perfect.
all right.
Yay, technical difficulties. All right, well,
Huzzah. Sorry about that, guys.
okay, so we'll go ahead and start over. Welcome, Samuel, to the Tonari Animation Podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you because I think there's like uh, a lot of cool topics to discuss around Castlevania and kind of its space in the industry. And I was also kind of interested to talk a bit about your background, how you got into animation and stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah, where should we begin?
Maybe you could start by kind of talking about what you do on Castlevania, kind of
Yeah.
your background and stuff.
I guess the best way to put it, is that I'm the series director on Castlevania, and I kind of oversee everything after the script writing and everything. So scripts they end up with me and here at Powerhouse, and we start to dive in, and I handle everything from trying to determine the character designs and helping with that and giving a lot of feedback and sometimes even doing a lot of the designs, giving direct feedback and making decisions on all the environment art and all that kind of stuff, as well as and the big thing is the storyboarding and animation, and I'm very hands on with all of that stuff. I love to storyboard as much as I'm able to manage, and I manage to slip in animation when I can. More so on season four. Previous seasons, it's hard to juggle multiple things, but I
Yeah.
cover a lot.
Um. So storyboarding on Castlevania has always been something that's like intriguing to me because it's so different from I think everything else that's out there. So because sometimes it even looks like full keyframe animation on
Yeah,
the storyboards.
yeah, right. The best way that I could put it is that Japanese boards are obviously they're a little bit they're more like what you expect from storyboards. They're kind of framing the shot and they're making those compositional decisions and stuff. But usually there aren't like a ton of different panels that I'm putting in there, and usually they're not super clean or anything. But the way that it's a little bit more common in Western productions, but the way that a Western production ends up working is oftentimes you're doing a much more thorough pre-production package for an outsourced studio that you're working with.
Mm.
In those cases, because of the location gap and the time gap and communication gap and everything else, you're kind of wanting to communicate as much information as possible. So storyboards for Western productions are often very thorough. They have lots of panels. They pretty much show each of the individual pose changes and expression changes and everything like that because they will be treated verbatim by um, the outsource studio that you're working with. So oftentimes they can end up being closer to something like a rough layout
Yeah.
than being a storyboard. And that's kind of where our production ends up differing because when it starts to come to certain things like action animation in particular, we start to incorporate um, in-house animators and freelance animators and
Mm-hmm.
an internal production pipeline versus just dumping it all over
Yeah.
SKUs.
Yeah, I
Um,
noticed that that's the case with like a lot of like pretty sure that was the case with the Avatar, The Last Airbender. Like most of the animation was done in Korea,
yeah, exactly.
but they
And
but they probably sent over like really solid boards, I'd
yeah,
assume.
it was kind of a different time because they were still boarding on paper back then,
Mm.
and so they were thorough boards, but it was not like you know Legend of Korra and more recently the Dota show and everything like that going over to Mir. They
Mm.
do really tight, keyed out boards and stuff that are even more directly tied to the animation than back during the Avatar days.
Mm.
Um, but the one of the interesting things that we have with our pipeline is that we actually run internal export scripts, proprietary scripts for uh, exporting the quote unquote storyboards that are sometimes just straight up, layout drawings onto animation templates to be that literally they put in front of the animators and they
Mm.
um, uh, do keyframe animation off of a lot of the time. So um, that's a process that they've been very appreciative of because it saves them a lot of headaches. And if we've done a good job of keeping everything on model and stuff, they do a really great job of bringing it to the final product. So um,
Yeah,
that's a unique process of ours.
yeah. It's like uh at Tonari, like we tried working on like Castlevania is actually the only Western project we've gotten to work on, but it's because
Mhm.
you guys are kind of in this ambiguous space where like certain the pipelines can work with each other. Like everyone pretty much for the most parts in like a raster vector space on Western animations, and anime is 100% raster. And
Yeah.
we were able to when we were working on the cleanup cuts for season 4, like we were able to use kind of our raster pipeline, even though it was a Western production, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's odd because the we have this split between our different cuts, and if you're looking for it, you can kind of spot it between shots. But we have the shots that are animated entirely by our animation partner in Korea, Tiger Animation.
Hmm.
Who that people think that we changed the animation studios between season 3 and 4. No, they just changed their name.
Oh,
It's all the
really?
same. It's all the same guys. That's a funny story. Anyways, they're obviously working on paper, and they scanned it in and they use Redis Pro to
Oh, yeah.
go through and uh, finish off the clean and color and everything like that. For our internal crew, we use Harmony, and some folks use Clip Studio, and some folks use, I think we've mostly weeded out the Flash
Oh,
animation, but
yeah.
that was pretty common. But it all kind of, if it ends up going through like the same kind of channels for the final cleanup and color, it doesn't really matter where the original animation was
Yeah,
done.
that's
It,
that's
it
that's
still
kind of how it
come
is
out
in
the same.
that's kind of how it is in anime too. Like it doesn't matter if you can do your keyframe animation on paper, Toon Boom, Flash, Clip Studio, like TV Paint doesn't matter because as long as it hits like that same, like as long as it's the cleanup is all done the same way, then yeah, it doesn't really matter because where the original animation comes from because
We do
you're
hit
just
like
tracing it.
we do hit some disparities where our internal crew prefers to keep everything inside of Harmony, including the cleanup. And so the cleanup done by the internal crew is usually like super tight and crisp. So you'll see these like sudden jumps where everything is like tighter and crisper than the surrounding animation.
Hmm.
And we just kind of accept it. We don't really care that much about like the minor disparities
Hmm.
from shot to shot, just so long as it looks good and production is going smoothly.
One thing that I thought was crazy was or kind of surprising was that the keyframe animators are doing their own in betweens. It seems.
Yeah, they're doing full roughs a lot of time, and a lot of that is it's honestly just the inexperience of younger animators.
Mm,
Not really like
not knowing how
taking
to utilize the in betweeners so
exactly
much.
like
Yeah.
we have a lot of right now very young, fresh animators that are new to
Mm-hmm. Um.
kind of train them up on that stuff. And they'll have some time and all that. When it comes to action animation, there is a certain amount of like, especially with the like I guess quality bar that we're often looking for. The action animators will be less inclined to even the folks that are experiencing it. Like Tam is more experienced with shipping off in
Mm-hmm.
between these days, but he's still very picky and
Yeah.
end up holding on to that in occasions where he probably shouldn't, and he should get some help. But it's is it possible to up Sam's truly imbalance between the two? I'll hold
I
the mic closer to me.
there we go. I turned
uh,
myself down a little bit too, which I think is gonna help.
all right, sorry guys. So yeah, that's an inexperienced thing, I think, and I mean the honest truth is that when it comes to anime style work in the U.S., you're usually going to be working with younger animators, folks who don't have that experience yet, because we just kind of got this thing going
Yeah.
fairly recently, and so
Yeah. Kind
it's
of.
a work in progress, you know.
Yeah. All the at least in the U.S., all like the traditional frame by frame animators, I feel like are retired almost.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So we kind of lost. There was like a period of time where we kind of lost that a little bit.
Yeah, when 2D animation and film collapsed, there were, all these different artists who were displaced, and they were making that good film money,
Yeah.
and when prospects of working in television animation, came along and stuff, they're like, well, I don't want to do that because I'm used to working at Disney.
Yeah.
And so, they started moving on to just doing things like teaching and or painting
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff.
Or like ending up in like some sort of like design, like color design positions or
Yeah, exactly.
something
So
that's like not
very, very different,
hand drawn animation.
So it's there was this kind of weird gap for a while,
Yeah, and the school stopped
and
teaching it too.
exactly. Everyone has to be self-taught in the U.S. now,
Yeah.
practically, because my school, I went to a community college. They didn't really have a strong focus
Yeah.
on it, and the a lot of the other folks, like literally, they were just shutting down 2D animation school
Mm-hmm.
or classes and stuff like that, and focusing entirely on pre-production and 3D animation. So yeah, if you're wanting to get in, you're kind of having to be self-taught. But at the same time, like honestly, because of the age of the internet, like being a self-taught artist is in any field is oftentimes better off for you and financially because of how expensive the schools have gotten and
Yeah.
how you're kind of like rolling the dice whether or not you're actually going to get the education that you need anyways.
Yeah.
Not to say that you're not gonna get a good education for some places, 'cause some people have walked out of school like amazing because they
Yeah.
went, but there's other folks who, they go and they walk out at about the same level they were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I also went to a community college and they had one animation class, and all I
Hmm.
really learned how to do was kind of use Flash a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. That's what I'm always telling people is that, like I went to school and I learned the software, and that
yeah.
was about what I got out
Yeah,
of
like
it.
we were watching YouTube videos in my college class, and I'm like, Why am I paying for this?
Oh man, yeah, I had this guy that and it was like one of the few animation classes that I got, and he wasn't really an animator, so what he was just doing was up there talking vaguely about animation while giving us like really basic assignments like the flour sack and
Yeah.
like a walk and
Oh,
stuff.
you
And
you got the flower sack? I didn't even get that.
I
I
got
just
the
got
flour
bouncing.
sack.
I got bouncing ball, and that's about it.
I took that class and I was like, I'm interested in animation, but I don't think I actually learned anything from that. And so my entire summer break, I did a Naruto fan animation, and I
Oh,
learned
nice.
more from that and
Yeah,
like stepping through Naruto Matsumoto stuff, way more from that than I did from my actual class.
yeah. I had to start a animation club at my school, and we
Oh,
we did a hand drawn short, and we learned a lot there. We didn't
oh,
finish, but
that's cool.
we we actually, well, we finished all the animation, but we didn't know how to do the compositing stuff. So we were like, we scanned in all the, or photographed all the frames. It was like 500 drawings or something like that.
Oh,
And then once we didn't know how to clean it up and like color it and then composite it, so it just died. But yeah, I definitely learned more doing like my own project as well.
yeah, yeah. It's that is kind of like the hard part when you get into it. Is like relatively easy to crank out some roughs, but then as soon as you're needing to do cleanup and color and everything else, especially for like a class, it's like, oh no.
Yeah. So how did you actually learn 2D animation, like hand drawn animation? Just self
uh,
taught.
well, like I said, I took a class, but it didn't really
Yeah.
teach me. So at the end of the day, yeah, I pretty much consider myself self-taught because it I learned way more from stepping through anime and trying stuff out and experimenting than I did from any of the like one or two classes that I actually took.
Hmm.
When it comes to the actual hand-drawn animation aspect of it. Um,
Yeah.
and I find that that's very common for animators in the US, and I wish that we had, you know, a better system for it, especially so that young animators can learn things like in between charting and all that kind of stuff to for a team-based project. But yeah, I learned animation on my own. Uh, I kind of got my foot in the door at Powerhouse when it was very, very small. I
Mm.
was like the eighth person at the studio, and we were just doing odd jobs at the time. But
Hmm.
um, basically, because I really wanted to do the kind of stuff that I'm doing today, I kept practicing on it. And then our CEO, Brad Graper, he was like, "Well, I mean, I would love to if the studio is able to do this kind of stuff." And he starts hunting for projects
Yeah.
that would allow us to do that. So that started getting us into video game animation and doing like cutscenes for games and doing
Yeah.
things for promotional videos and etc. And
Yeah.
um,
That sounds really
that
similar to kind of what we're working on right now in Tonari. Like we're doing odd jobs mainly.
Yeah, and Powerhouse still has that aspect of it. Like it's still doing the we call it the boutique projects where it's
Hmm.
like short form animation, and um, that's I was doing that for 10 years,
Oh wow.
and that eventually led to starting to getting over to I saw an article about the Castlevania stuff starting up, and me and my brother being big Castlevania fans, we were like, "Well, shit,
Hmm.
um, I'd love to work on that." I mean, there's like no chance, right? And Brad happened to know some folks over at Frederator and got the foot in the door, and
Oh nice.
Kevin I did a bunch of concept sketches and sent them over to Brad, and he showed them to Kevin, and Kevin was like intrigued.
Hmm.
And so we went over and talked to him, and he liked that. Uh, uh, Number one, obviously, like we had a really good handle on action animation, and no one else that he really knew, I think, had quite that kind of that specific skill. for anime style stuff, and that we had the love for Castlevania as well as that drive because we were, we never worked on series productions, or we really wanted it. We were eager and hungry and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So, that combination of things, I think, kind of intrigued them. And yes, I did work on the Battle Chasers.
Mm.
Sorry, I just saw that
Yeah,
in the
someone in
chat.
chat. Yeah.
On that opening, I storyboarded that, and I did a handful of the cuts. But then, actually, I think Castlevania started, and I wasn't able to do much more of the animation. It was just like happened to be right in the middle of all
Yeah.
that.
So one thing I'm kind of curious about, it's like, so you spent 10 years doing kind of like a bunch of random miscellaneous stuff, which you know, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And it's really interesting because I'm constantly working on something different. How is it different working on like something like you've been working on Castlevania for like 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Like how does that feel like compared to just working on a bunch of random stuff?
Gosh, it's very different. It's sometimes I actually miss I sometimes miss hopping styles because
Mm-hmm.
I would be going from doing, you know, pixel art to working on, Mickey Mouse, and then doing Battle Chasers and stuff, and
Yeah.
so it was just all over the place, and that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
But I much prefer the long-term schedules.
Yeah.
Being able to account for everything that's coming down the line, having a handful of people that I have to deal with as far as clients.
Oh, yeah.
When there was times where I was working on 5 different projects at once back in the day, and
Mm-hmm.
every client was different, and it was just like all over the place, and you never had enough time to really like
Like
develop a good
develop the
rapport
relationship. Yeah.
with each client. So it was just like that was much more nightmarish than just working
Mm-hmm.
with like a handful of guys that I've gotten to know really well over the years, and we just have like a good rapport. We can generally shoot the shit and stuff. So like that's what I'm enjoying right now. Moving on to the Castlevania spin-off is like, I know Kevin Coldy is this guy that I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with for a long time, and
Yeah.
so he's uh, uh, you know, we know how to communicate with each other, and we can be direct and all that kind of stuff, and so it's good. Um, Whereas back in the day, like I didn't really know any of those guys that I would work with on those like little short form things, and it was just like that was weird. And you have just because every project is different, your deadlines are just there's like sometimes you have 3 in one week, and then you have one each week, and then some you have like a few months out and all that shit. And it's just like,
Yeah.
ugh.
Um, I was reading this article that was written by, I guess it was an essay or something written by Hayao Miyazaki, and he was talking about after they made Ghibli uh, things, after I think their second movie or something like that. He was kind of looking back at when the studio first started, and it was like really exciting and everyone's energetic and motivated, and then he was kind of talking about how the studio eventually started kind of getting stale, and like people are just there to like do their work, go home, collect a paycheck. Is that like what are you guys doing to kind of keep the I guess the energy, because Powerhouse isn't new anymore, I guess,
Well,
so
it's
it's
not new, but it's so different.
mm-hmm.
Like it's been changing and evolving so consistently over the years that I think that is what keeps the energy up, is just like that evolution, as well as um we have a lot of new young talent that comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and
And they're
all
all
that
really
stuff.
excited.
And I think that Miyazaki, I mean, I think that he started Ghibli, and those guys were probably like in their 40s already.
Yeah.
And so by then, like there was probably a certain level of like they were already going to be working on. They'd already worked on a bunch of stuff. And they were getting older and all that kind of
Yeah, they've
stuff.
kind of already achieved their dreams, so at that point they're just kind of
Yeah, at that point they're
keeping it
just kind
going.
of, and I think that's probably because I they were mostly just leaning on their main directors a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
time and didn't really bring in a lot of fresh folks except for here and there. And so that probably kept some of the energy a little bit lower. Whereas for us, we got so many different people that are coming in. We're elevating up to directing their own shows and
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. I think that by that like you know constant cycle
Always
of giving
growing.
people and growing and
Yeah.
trying um, you know the variety of different projects that we're going to be doing and having for a long time. um, I can imagine that kind of keeping the energy up, but I mean, like at the moment, the when we started just getting series work and stuff, that was that was almost like a reset because it was just
Yeah.
like we're at a new studio practically.
Yeah, because you can bring more people on. You're like more secure, and your position and all that.
Yeah, being able to look 3 years ahead and being like, okay, cool, like we're set for a while and all that. That certainly keeps things fresh.
Yeah. Do you think Castlevania is kind of helping make that type like traditional, like I guess I call it like 2D traditional digital animation, but um like I think Castlevania is kind of helping prove that the medium's not really like, for some reason I think Disney thought that the medium was the problem, and that's why they axed
they,
their.
they they certainly thought that they were, I think, wrong, but
Yeah.
there was a certain level of like back in the 90s and early 2000s. There was a certain level of like um, wow factor to 3D animation that
Mm-hmm.
caught people's interest and stuff. Um, that I think is gone at this point. Like
Yeah. It's
people
kind of
just
mundane now.
yeah, they're used
Standard.
to it, and every 3D animated feature like has like a certain range that they hit, only with a few that kind of push outside of that a bit. And so I think that for the most part, like it's because it's become so expected that that aspect of it is kind of dead. But it's hard to tell whether or not general audiences can like look at 2D animation and like feature animation and um, would be uh, open open-minded about it, or like whether or not they would look at it and think that it looks old or cheap or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And there's some folks out there that have that mindset, which sucks, but it
Yeah.
is what it is. Um,
I don't know. I
but
think there's like something romantic about like hand drawn animation that just you can't get with uh
yeah, I think that
3D.
there's something about the craft of it and that personal touch that the animator puts into it and everything that is just really cool and unique, and not only to watch but also to do and to work on. And that's what I love about it. It's just like how much of a direct connection you have as an animator when you're drawing your frames, between you and the audience, because they're getting you know uh, your drawings
Yeah.
right in front of them. Whereas, like, whenever I've thought about, because back at least in school and everything, I thought about getting into 3D, and um, I know there was this disconnect because of how um, um, there was this kind of it felt like a gap between me and the viewer, is the
Mm-hmm.
best way that I could put it, because there are so many steps involved.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about something. So you said you did like when you were in college. I think you're like 10 years older than me. So if you were probably in college about 10 years before I was. So when you were doing your like fan project where you said you learned a lot like on how to like make animation from that. Were there like, how did you even like find out how to do it back then? Like I think the Animator Survival Kit existed back then, but that's not really that's more of
Uh,
like a.
Truth be told, I never actually read that.
Oh, really?
Like I cracked it open and like thumbed through a couple of pages and I got the gist from that, and then I was just like, okay, well, that's it. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm not a very good example for all
Just kind of trial and
all
error
those
then.
books. Yeah, it's yeah, it weirdly was just like stepping through animation and absorbing it, uh, a certain level of gut instinct.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch animation enough, and you're paying attention enough and absorbing enough, and it's weird how much you actually learn just from viewing and thinking. Uh,
Yeah.
so that was a big part of it. Is just like once I started to watch things and then thumb through and see what different master animators were doing with their frames to get a certain feel from it. It started to click, and I started to, um, you know, work that into me feeling out timing my animation um, uh, and sketching it out and everything and
Mm-hmm.
posing things. But the uh, Uh, I guess like the thing that I had going for me that made it a little bit easier is that I had originally thought that, like, 2D animation wasn't really doing much in the U.S. At the
Mm-hmm.
time of and especially back then. Like nowadays, it's kind of perked back up and stuff. But
Yeah.
back then, it was like I wasn't really interested in any of the kinds of productions that were being made out here, whether I wanted to just get into pre-pro or not. So I figured I was going to be getting into video games or
Mm-hmm.
illustration or something like that. So I had a bit of a focus on illustration and concept art, and so I had worked on my draftsmanship, just like general drawing skills. So when I went into animation, I at least had the draftsmanship aspect of it, like decently, um, and that making that connection was easier due to
Yeah.
that.
It was
Like,
like it's like almost intuitive at that point because you can just be like, okay,
yeah,
I'm just drawing and I'm
it
just
was just
moving the
taking the
drawings.
solid drawing and posing and stuff that I had already
Yeah.
kind of picked up on and applying it to uh, that, and somehow it ended up clicking.
Yeah.
But it
For
took me
me,
a
it was
while to
like,
actually like tighten up and get better about certain things. Like I'll look at some of the younger animators out there, and I'm like, damn, you're like
yeah,
10 years ahead of where I was and
yeah.
all this kind of stuff.
Well,
I'm like, Jesus.
I think there's more resources today
Yeah.
than there was back then too. So
God, if
I think
Sakuga
everyone's kind
Boru
of
had existed back then,
yeah,
damn, that is such an amazing
yeah.
Resource it is so great. I mean, YouTube is good too.
Hmm.
We didn't even have YouTube like or like
There wasn't an
not in
animator
any
community really on.
yeah, not anything like what it was back then when I was that was actually closer to 15 years ago. I'm
Hmm.
old. Uh, so it was just very very different.
Yeah,
Um,
I was trying to learn how to make animation I was in college in 2014, and even then there was like nothing to be found on the internet that wasn't in Japanese about like
answer your question, Vaughn, no, there was nothing. My mentor was uh, usually well, hush hush. I had to download a lot of my anime off of torrents and stuff back then.
and
It's a
then
lot
just scrub
easier
through
these
them.
days with streaming and stuff,
Yeah.
but back in the day, I had to buy anime on VHS, and
Oh man.
eventually the internet came around, and that made it a little easier. And now we can just stream shit.
Yeah. Um, like for me, like it was kind of the opposite. Like for some reason, I felt this like extreme need to discover the technical production processes and all that.
Hmm.
Like for some reason, I wasn't really so worried about like the actual drawing animation. I was more like, how do they take the drawings from the paper to the screen? Like what happens in the middle? Like for some reason, I was like really obsessed with trying to figure that out. And how I figured it out was like I got involved in the online animator community. Some of the people who were actually in the Japanese anime industry, and they kind of
Hmm.
taught me all the stuff that I know, or they kind of gave me the starting point so that I know where to look. And then I
That's
learned
great.
after learning the pipeline, I started learning the drawing part of it.
Oh
So I
yeah,
guess it's
that's
kind of
great.
backwards.
No, I mean that's good though, because so many of us kind of dived in just like going uh, uh, by instinct,
Hmm.
and so like retrofitting the proper process is sort of like weird, it kind of throws you off a bit. So going it the other way around and actually learning that and everything is good for you.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a if which way is better because I say like
Yeah, I don't know.
once you're good at animation, then you can apply that to like a studio environment and then learn the process of that studio, I guess.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, you end up in the same place,
Yeah.
uh, w- one way or another.
So when you became an animator, did you think you were going to be a director eventually, or did that just kind of happen and you're like, whoa?
Oh yeah, I had no idea. Um, I've never looked very far ahead. It's always just been like one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when opportunities present themselves, we kind of just would go for it. And it's never been like this grand plan or anything.
Yeah.
My focus has always been like entirely on just getting better myself.
Yeah.
Um, and the shift of what that means, getting better, has changed now that I have become a director, because
Yeah.
it's not entirely about drawing
Yeah.
or animation or even storyboarding. There's now I have this whole new set of skills that I've had to learn with organizing and uh, working with people and coaching them, and um, trying to you know this broader visual storytelling stroke than what you get off of individual scenes and stuff, and it's
Yeah. I think that
very
stuff
different.
sounds really fun and interesting because you get to
it,
take that kind of holistic view of the whole project.
yeah, it's interesting. It's weird, like I haven't been able to let go of the actual animation aspect
Mm-hmm.
of it though.
Yeah, that's good though because
And
that keeps you like grounded in the project.
Yeah, certainly, and I think that there's times where directors, especially here in the West, where folks tend to just go straight into storyboarding because there is no animation pipelines for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of studios. Um, they they don't have that connection to the animation. Like they don't always necessarily understand um, that. And one of the things that you see with a lot of uh, directors and board artists and stuff in Japan is that because they've been through those trenches,
Yeah, I
um,
was literally gonna
they
bring up the word trenches.
yeah, they understand how to pull back and balance for the broad strokes of the project, and making sure that they're not killing themselves or their team and stuff
Yeah,
throughout the project by piling on too much.
yeah,
And that's an aspect that like kind of goes right over the heads of a lot of I think uh, board artists and directors over here, because they don't even see that aspect of it.
yeah.
They
Because
just ship it to Korea and never see it.
most of them
But we
aren't coming up from animation. They're probably coming from production, right? For the most part,
uh
like Western
they
directors.
it's typically they're well, a lot of time they're going straight into storyboarding, and they go
Mm.
from storyboard revisionist to storyboard artist, and then director from
Yeah,
there.
and they never had to
And yeah,
draw
there's
like
never.
in
I
betweens and
think
clean
it's
up and all that.
yeah, they miss all that aspect of it, and so there is a little bit, I think, of a disconnect sometimes. And that's not true of everyone, obviously, but it's uh, you know, it's um, a good thing that mm, their way up
Hmm.
uh, into those positions because they get that full view of
Yeah, it seems
art.
really advantageous, in my opinion, to start off as an animator.
Yeah. I think that animators also make really great storyboard artists. Just like looking at our own productions, because they
Hmm.
just um, uh, the way that they understand, like, kind of key posing things out, um, and uh, kind of the flow from one pose into another, and breaking things down and whatnot. Um, seems to be an direct, like an easier connection for them than you know what might happen if it's like a comic book artist that's jumps in. Yeah, usually though, you train someone for a little bit and you talk to them about it, and they'll figure it out too. But I do find that animators tend to have that easier connection to storyboarding.
Yeah, in anime, there's a I've worked with direct a lot of different directors so far, and it's really interesting. Even on the anime side of things, the difference between people that come from a production background and some that come from a animation background, because it's like the guys that come from the production background, they don't necessarily like their boards are really messy and the drawings look kind of bad,
Yeah.
but often they're more rooted in writing, and sometimes like they'll have more like emotional scenes and stuff like that, and they're really emphasizing what each character's feeling in every moment, whereas like the directors that are coming from the animation background, they're just trying to make cool animation. So
Yeah.
maybe there's advantages to both. I've never worked with any Western directors that come from production or writing backgrounds, but
Yeah, that's I don't know. That's interesting. I think that they exist, but I haven't really worked with a lot of folks that like that. Um, I think that probably ends up being more of a feature thing. It's probably
yeah,
something you see more in feature film
like
than we do
movies.
in
Yeah,
television production. Um, in part because television production requires so much of the storyboarding to be very layout like I said very a lot
yeah,
earlier. Um, and so like the actual drawing capability ends up taking a higher uh, it ends up being more important because of communicating the idea through drawing, and less so through um, you know explanation or notes or so on. I've seen some of the messier Japanese boards and stuff like that, and you see all the notes on the side and stuff like that. And I've spoken with some of our partners actually out in Korea about what it's like to work with Japanese productions and
mm-hmm.
how different it is. Because we've worked with not on Castlevania, but on some of our other shows. DR Movie obviously works with tons and tons of anime, and last time we were out there, I think they were working on Banana Fish,
Okay,
and they were talking about how for a Western production, obviously they get these very thorough uh, uh, pre-production packages with the storyboards kind of like spelling everything out.
yeah,
But with and then they get these nice schedules. Sorry, like our schedules are pretty cush
yeah,
usually.
yeah. Even the
But
stuff that we worked on for you guys, that it was pretty lenient
yeah,
schedule.
it was more flexible. Whereas when it comes to the Japanese productions, they get a much rougher pre-production package. Like their storyboards are usually they don't spell anything out. They they go into these very long meetings where the director is going through the storyboards and
Yeah, it's kind
explaining
of explaining
everything, and
the
yeah,
scribbles. Yeah.
and talking through everything. And because of how much information can get lost through that process, they usually end up doing well. Number one is they crank all that stuff out very quickly
Yeah.
because they're Japanese anime schedules are terrible.
Yeah.
Uh, but they then um, have way more retakes than they
Oh
usually
yeah.
have to deal with in
Yeah.
U.S. productions
Yeah, what I
because
found.
all they're making all the creative decisions for the shot right
Yeah.
there in their layouts and rough animation and stuff, which is that adds a lot of room for error that you don't have in Western productions. Like there's
Yeah.
it's pretty spelled out. So our process is obviously very different, but it's safer and it's smoother.
Yeah. I found the production, like we experience that a lot with the retake situation, especially if it's on scenes where the characters need to be expressing a specific nuanced emotion or something like that, that gets like completely lost, especially in the translations that we're doing, because we're working with Japanese boards and then like translating it to English.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but if it's like action shots or just characters moving around, we usually don't end up with retakes because there's no like context of the scene that's like really important or anything. It's just, oh, these characters are carrying a table from here to here.
Yeah.
Uh,
We tend to kind of take care of all those things. Again, you've seen some of the cleaner boards and stuff that we'll end up providing. Um, and we very rarely actually have had the opportunity to do like kind of fully animated acting clips and stuff, acting animation, which is unfortunate. Like
yeah, you
we try
mostly
to
do
slip
a lot
in
of
some of it.
like lip flaps and stuff.
Yeah, it's pose to pose lip flaps and whatnot, and that is
Mm-hmm.
in part because our character designs are pretty
It was,
complicated,
yeah,
but
pretty hard to draw.
um, we don't have necessarily. We also don't necessarily have like Japan has large swath of great key animators
Mm-hmm.
that they can go to on the fly, and the setup that we have with our uh, outsourced studio that we work with, and then our internal animators and the freelance animators, stuff like that. Um, I mean, just due to the fact that all of our top animators have to focus on the action.
Yeah,
Um, Means that we have to focus on usually pose to
you
pose,
can't do everything
cleaner. Yeah, we
with
can't do
few
everything,
people.
and
Yeah,
it also gets really it can get expensive really fast.
yeah,
And it already is
yeah,
too expensive as it is. Well, I'm glad that we get you know better budgets than anime, but it's not like
yeah,
it's not. I think folks probably think that we've had like crazy budgets, but no.
yeah,
It's not quite like that. Like anime gets totally like they're not paying their
yeah.
guys
The
well enough
anime
at
budgets are
all.
like $250,000 per episode. So and that's
um,
not just for animation. That's for everything.
yeah, it's
So
absurd.
yeah,
So like it's night and it's night and day in that regard, but it's still like we pay people good living wages,
yeah,
um, but it doesn't mean that we have like more people or anything like that
yeah,
to throw out a project. It just means that people are actually able to make an okay living,
yeah,
within like kind of um, a similar overall structure in terms of number of artists, but we spread it the way that we can kind of like get that quality out is due to our longer schedules.
mm-hmm.
We get more bang for our buck out of the smaller talent
Yeah.
pool.
Um, about like I have a feeling that there's just a globally there's a shortage of animators that can do like 2D animation. Um, and my theory is that the reason that is not just because like the West kind of axed their original like their traditional 2D animation departments. But I think it's also because like studios stopped training people internally because there was like I guess a lot of studios got used to having like art school grads coming in that didn't need training.
Oh
But I
yeah,
remember like back in the day, Disney used to have like I'm pretty sure they had a school in their studio where they would train animators.
that
Because
sounds like something they would do.
I
I'm
knew
not sure.
I knew someone that went to it and they learned like a lot of cool stuff.
That's great.
Um, but I think nowadays we're kind of just although like there's a lot of people that want to do animation, and I think we're in this kind of space where anyone that spends the time to self teach will get work.
Yeah. um, I think that one of the complicated things that we're looking at when it comes to all of these different animators learning the craft across the world is um, the fact that we are looking at a worldwide community
Yeah,
rather than communities within
like
certain specific countries like
yeah,
just Japan or just the US and stuff.
yeah,
And the education gaps across all these different places across the world are vastly different. Even just in the U.S., it's depending on what state you live in, you might
yeah,
have completely different resources. Um, and so you're not really. Uh, I actually think that we have a much broader uh, base of artists that are learning or can learn to
mm-hmm.
animate, um, and are very much have the capacity to get up to that skill level very quickly. It's just that there aren't education resources in the individual places that each of these folks are
Yeah,
across the world, um, and so it really is, I think, up to the online community, I
mm-hmm.
think, to keep putting resources out there and making that available to folks. And we do have these great resources like Sakagaboro, but we don't necessarily have like specifically teaching resources. And
Yeah,
there's a few things that are kind of sprinkled out there, but a lot of folks don't know a damn thing about uh, charting or
yeah,
X sheets or anything like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And there's
That's
no resources out there anywhere. Like you can
yeah,
find a few things here and there, but there's even differences between like charting in a Western production or for
yeah,
Disney animation versus charting for a anime.
yeah. I think
Um,
one small example is just like the layer numbering system. Like in anime, it's like A through F, and then I think Western uses numbers for the cell layers. Like you have multiple characters.
oh yeah, yeah. And that stuff gets confusing, and
Yeah,
um, even between different studios, it can be different because we take advantage of our digital pipeline
yeah,
ourselves to cut back on how much we need to worry about like exposure sheets and stuff like that.
mm-hmm.
Because really, if everyone switched to digital, you wouldn't really need exposure sheets anymore because it's right there.
Yeah. Well,
um,
what I think's interesting about that point is the Japanese productions have a really efficient compositing pipeline where like they don't whoever's doing compositing is pretty much just following the instructions that are given to them based on the X sheet. Like they'll look at the X sheet, then they'll enter the X sheet into like a plugin on After Effects, and then it'll automatically do the timing for them and all that, and then they'll just do all the pans and all these like camera blurs, zooms, whatever, based on the exact timing on the X sheet. Um,
yeah.
and I think
I mean, like at the end of the day, the way that when we're using a harmony, for example, that's actually part of our. It's an automated
yeah,
process.
it's built into it, right? Built into the
Well,
animation.
they don't have necessarily something built in, but we created a proprietary script for exporting all of the layers timed with an importing process that automatically times it all out.
Hmm.
So basically, like 2 clicks, and you have all of your animation imported and timed out. And I think that the guys even uh, have figured out ways to bring in the camera information. Although our compositing guys, I like to call them compositing artists because
Yeah,
um, they're doing
they
a
get some
lot more
decisions.
yeah, creative decisions and stuff. And sometimes that is like, embellishing on work and et cetera,
Yeah.
that through their own accord and their own pipeline that isn't necessarily just like dictated in the animation.
Yeah, I heard that that's one of the reasons a lot of studios are kind of stuck on Toon Boom is because there's a lot of that kind of compositing information built into the animation itself. Like I was working
Oh,
on one cut, we were trying to do a cut with a studio that was working with Toon Boom, and I downloaded Toon Boom and I started messing with it, and they had sent me exported keyframes, and then they had also sent me the Toon Boom file, and on the exported keyframes, it was just like a close up of the character and like the wind blowing around and stuff like that. It had some swirling effects and things. And I was like, okay, this is gonna be easy. I can clean this up, no problem. And then I started to just trace over the export, and then I didn't even open the Toon Boom file. I opened the Toon Boom file, and there's a whole character that's off camera. I'm like, what is happening here? And apparently they were panning the camera up during the animation or something like that inside Toon Boom. I'm like, interesting.
well, some of that is something that we uh, get our animators not to do.
Yeah, it seems like like
Uh,
wasted effort if you're like drawing outside the
exactly.
the
And
camera window.
so one of the things that I try to like drill into our animators is like think like this is paper.
Yeah,
um
yeah
because
definitely
like you don't want to do drawings outside of the canvas that end up being wasted. And
yeah
you want to think about camera movement not as like taking the camera and moving it way over here and following the character, but instead move the background
yeah
like you would see in anime
yeah
and
because you
stuff like
paint the
that.
background once. You don't have to draw it a million times like the character. So
Yeah, that is a something of an inexperienced thing for when it comes to digital animation is like how well someone understands to um, uh, you how they handle their background movement,
mhm.
uh, and whether or not they're being smart about using the tools to avoid a bunch of extra work with the cleanup and stuff. Because yeah, I've seen some stuff that just got like way back in the day, way back before the uh, like when I first started, where things would get cleaned up when it was off camera and like completely wasted, and I was just like, "What are we doing?"
Yeah.
So I'll be like, "No, none of that anymore." So that's something of a like it's easy to get lost in the infinite expanse of digital spaces that you can work in, and you kind of have to like get that to click really early on with animators.
Yeah, another thing I found shocking too was the fact that the lines were actually vectors, and it was like required to connect all the vector points together so
Uh,
that it would like I guess be colorable.
oh, I hate that crap.
Yeah.
That's probably because they were using they were having y'all use uh, the pencil tool instead of the brush tool. I hate having to deal with the fills using that stuff in Toon Boom. So
Yeah.
everyone just works with the brush tool because it makes it so much easier to fill because um, it's kind of like with the flash brush where the outside of it counts as the vector line rather
Oh
than
yeah.
just the little single inside line.
Yeah.
Um, and so it makes it a lot easier to just like connect things and fill stuff in really quickly.
Yeah, I got so used to raster that it seems like kind of crazy to have to deal with vector lines for some reason. But
it is way easier when you're using the brush tool versus some of the
yeah, I
other
could see
stuff.
that. That makes sense.
One of the other benefits is how much simpler it is to, let's say that you want to, um, grab certain elements and copy lines over. You can kind of like cheat a favor pretty easily without it like really looking uh, like a like it's too um, copied or anything.
Hmm.
By copying elements and then moving around and giving
Yeah.
it a little bit of a three-dimensional feel by grabbing certain parts. Like if you're doing a face or something like that, you can kind of grab the nose and move it up a little and move the face up on the head a little bit further, and you can get a little bit of a three-dimensional turn to get like a close favor. Um, but it's a fine line because if you don't do that right, it ends up looking like puppet animation, and I
Yeah,
don't like that.
exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I have
sometimes it
to
even happens
have to
in
watch folks pretty closely on that.
sometimes it even happens in anime because sometimes people get
Mhm.
tempted to just use the transform tool and just move stuff around, and it's like
Yeah,
you can. It's easy to
there's a right
tell.
way to do it, and there's a wrong way to
Yeah,
do
the
it.
way I do it is I'll just trace the same drawing again before using the transform tool, and
Mm.
then I can't trace it perfectly, so it slightly moves the lines a little bit so it looks
Yeah,
alive. Like a
one of my tricks is if I copy the ink lines over, I always redo the shadows.
mm,
And the just redoing the shadows by itself gives you enough of that boil to where it doesn't look like the same drawing anymore.
yeah. Uh, all right. Well, we've been going for about an hour now. If you want to, we can go ahead and move into
You
Q
rambled.
and A. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously lots of stuff that I probably can't talk about, so I'll just have to ignore certain things or skip over certain things. But
hmm
yeah,
Um, you did say I saw on your Twitter that you guys are hiring in between artists. Is that still true? Are you guys still looking for
yeah,
people?
yeah. So we've got we're looking for uh, uh, cleanup and in between animators. We do have a, handful of positions for full-time animator, um, full-time storyboard artist, um, and a couple of compositing positions as well. We've got some folks. We've got some openings to fill on my team, and the studio in general has lots of openings as well.
Is it remote or in person?
It's it can be either. Like
Either.
there's a I want to have folks under our roof if we can have it, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, especially right now with the pandemic and everything, we're
Still remote.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're full remote, and then I hope that folks will come and join us here in Austin. And if you want to, that's cool. If you don't, that's cool too. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the opening uh, that you can't be brought on for the opening.
Yeah. If you guys end up getting a job at Powerhouse, you should. I live in Austin too, so I'll show you guys a really cool Japanese restaurant I like downtown.
Oh, which one's that?
It's a it's called a Sushi Junai Omakaze.
Oh, I haven't
It's
been there
on
actually.
Congress. Oh, it's like a high class, fancy like sushi place. They
Ooh,
have like a lot of imported Japanese beers, and it's like a really classy atmosphere. Like,
ooh.
they have a like nice elevator, kind of smooth jazz music playing, and it totally doesn't feel like downtown Austin, because
I
everywhere else
haven't.
down there is like crazy party time. Is most of downtown.
Yeah, I haven't done the Sixth Street scene in a long time.
Oh yeah,
I'm an old man now. Plus, I live in Pflugerville, so I'm just like a little further out than. I mean, it's not that bad of a drive, but I'm a little bit further out than I prefer to do.
Mm. Yeah, I'm in East Austin, so it's like 20 minutes to get to downtown. So
Okay, nice.
yeah. Okay, so let's see what questions we got built up here. Um, let's see. So, what happened to the Belmont sword after season 2? I get Trevor likes the shorter swords, but where is it? It's a question from JF.
I'm gonna say that he either had it back in the back of the wagon, or it's is sitting somewhere in the castle. Ultimately, um, the sword was just too big and clunky for Trevor, and he's a little bit more roguelike. Likes to uh, move a little quicker, and so having this big clunky sword with him just wasn't his style. But it was all he had at the time back in season 2. You know.
Speaking of weapons, I actually have a question. So, I haven't seen all of Castlevania yet, but I know that his whip changes to like a chain at some point.
Hmm.
Uh, I had to do an animation for a different project recently where I had to draw a bunch of chains. Surely you guys have figured out a way to quickly make chains, because that was one of the most like painful things I've ever had to draw is like
Yeah,
chains whipping around.
yeah, it's the worst. Yeah, we created a simple script that populates a line
Oh, that sounds so nice.
with a chain. It doesn't work for things that very obvious, like when a chain comes really close to
Close
the
to the camera,
camera and
yeah.
it's like
Then you have to draw
going
it.
in perspective or anything. It doesn't work for that, and it doesn't work for smears and stuff, obviously. But for just like the general flinging around and stuff, it worked great for that. Now, the our friends at Tiger Animation, all working on paper, unfortunately,
Yeah, they have to draw it
they
by
had
hand.
they were drawing it by
Oh
hand,
man,
which is a nightmare.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the Morning Star itself, even just like the handle on it, it had so many model issues that we had to go and deal with. And
Mm-hmm.
um, fortunately for us in house, we built a 3D model, and we didn't use the 3D model in the animation itself, but we used it for reference for various angles. So in house, the handle itself was generally like nice and on model.
Okay, questions are starting to pile up here. Let's see. Um, Ridiculous 22 is saying, at what point would you consider someone's art good enough for professional work? Is there some sort of criteria, consistency, or something generally accepted as enough to start applying?
It depends on the production. Castlevania obviously requires, generally speaking, a pretty uh, uh, high level of draftsmanship, as well as a good understanding of uh, volumetric character design in anime. So if if I see someone's portfolio, there might be a really great portfolio that has flatter, more geometric character art for cartoonier productions, stuff like that. They might be great artists, but may not be a good fit for Castlevania.
Mm.
And if someone just doesn't have those draftsmanship skills up, that might be hard for them to get work. Now that is for specifically like animation or storyboarding or design or anything like that. Something that is important to consider is that not every job on an animation production is like specifically like a drawing job. There are other things that you can do and be a part of the production and get your foot in the door. So you can come in. One of the ways that some folks might come in is to come in as a production assistant,
Mm-hmm.
and you can go from that into being a production coordinator and up to production manager, or some folks will go to production assistant, but will be like a decent artist, but just by like kind of being around other artists and absorbing from them and stuff like that, they'll start to improve and make their way into getting their foot in the door as an artist, on a production. And so
Mm.
there's lots of different routes that you can take. The compositing crew, they don't necessarily, they're not all folks who can draw well, but they are bringing a really a powerful uh, artistic vision
Mm.
to the compositing aspect of it. And so, like jumping in through After Effects and learning how to apply effects to that and lighting and color, that's a great way to get in as well without necessarily being someone who has strong draftsmanship. So, there's lots of things to consider if you're not necessarily there yet when it comes to your drawing skills.
Let's see. Priest is asking if there's. I think we answered this question already, but are there places to apply for jobs on the actual site? I think you mentioned that
Yeah,
it's
there should
preferred
be
if people
a
move like to Austin, right?
Oh, I would like if folks would move to Austin, but we are looking at remote hires right now. So if you're not in the U.S. or if you're not able to move, don't necessarily count yourself out. And there should be a careers portal on the website.
Yeah, someone asked about that too. Um, Ryusu is asking if when you mentioned the in-house script, so he's curious if you guys have programmers.
Yeah, actually, Krishna Jain. He is a longtime powerhouse guy and a friend of mine, and he is a big part of spearheading the scripting for our projects, and
That's
has
cool.
done incredibly cool work both in After Effects and in Flash and in Toon Boom and everything else, and has made lots of really cool things for speeding up our pipeline. After Effects in particular, we have so many. We have like a launch board of like dozens of icons that just make it one click to do all sorts of cool things. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
a lot of bigger studios pretty much all have programmers. I think too.
Yeah,
So
you got like speeding up production by having like someone there. Especially in Krishna's case, he is an artist. He has an art background as well, so he understands animation and programming in tandem. So he knows what what the artist needs. Oh, hey Patrick, how you doing? Patrick is the director on Masters of the Universe. He's
oh,
come to
nice.
hang out.
Welcome. Kaizenego's asking, as a self-taught animator, what did you do to help keep yourself motivated during the learning process?
Um, I guess I'm lucky in that I've never really struggled with motivation. I just always wanted to get better. Uh,
Mm, yeah.
And so I just kept thinking about like, okay, what do I need to work on to get better? Um, but I don't get, I never really got hung up on like, what I was drawing or animating. I was just like looking for excuses to draw or to animate. And a lot of the time that just meant that I was going to do some fan art and stuff like that because it was an easy way for me to like just start drawing and putting something out there. So one of the other things I like to what that I like about like I think is helpful for up and coming animators um, is working on um, to work on their animation is by doing fan animations of characters that have like model sheets and stuff out there.
Hmm.
You're getting you're not trying to work off of your own model sheets because let's be fair, like an up and coming animator is not always going to be a good character designer.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to learn a lot from animating someone else's, like a veteran character designer's character designs,
Yeah.
a lot
I
more
agree with
from
that.
that than trying to animate your own designs, unless you happen to have been like a really great character designer first and then moved into animation. Uh,
Yeah.
I think that it's helpful, especially because an animator is very, very rarely going to animate their own design.
Hmm. Yeah, because even once you're at the point where you're creating the designs, at least in anime, your job changes to just fixing other people's animations or drawings to be more on model.
Yeah, I've done my fair share of that.
Yeah. I got to do that on anime for the first time recently, and it was pretty crazy. I had to do 31 cuts of corrections in a week.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
wow.
Uh, I had to go really fast, and I'm not super happy with the results, but
How I'm curious, like how thorough did you have to be with that? Do you do like complete drawovers, or do you do like bits and pieces here and there?
for those cuts, it was almost complete drawovers. There was like some crowd shots that I had to do, but I on those I didn't have time to draw every single person in the crowd, so I just did the ones that were like being focused on in that crowd shot.
Mhm.
The
As you should.
but the actual cuts that I got were really rough, like and super off model. So I pretty much had to redraw the whole thing.
Ugh, that's rough.
Yeah. But
I've
but
done
I
that.
only had to redraw a few key poses, and then the when it goes back to second key animation, then those are those correction drawings are implemented throughout all the animation. So like I can rely on the
I
on
gotcha. I
those
gotcha.
people a bit. Um, Zade's asking, do you think Powerhouse would ever do a show that's not dark fantasy action?
Um, I guess it depends on not everything's dark fantasy per se, but we do have shows that are that are coming up that are not in fantasy, and some that are not quite as dark.
Hmm.
But if your question is whether or not we will get into doing like a cute slice of life, that is more of a question for audiences and Netflix
Hmm.
than it
Yeah.
is whether or not because we obviously would have lots of artists who would want to do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's just that it's a different kind of audience.
Yeah, it seems like Netflix is really going in on like the shonen kind of action stuff. It
Yeah,
seems. I
yeah.
think they've
At the
done a
moment,
few.
yeah.
I think they've done a few slice of life shows. Wasn't
It-
was Carol and Tuesday Netflix? I think.
well, when I'm thinking of, I guess, like what they're going to greenlight for a Western production, um, it's hard to imagine them greenlighting a cute slice of life coming out of a
Out of a
Powerhouse. But
Western studio, yeah.
yeah, when it comes to Japanese, when it comes to anime, it's obviously, well, the whole structure for how they end up funding those and stuff like that is different. Because with Castlevania, it's like 100% them these days. They put that in there. But with anime, sometimes it's split, and so like they're kind of like doing part of
Yeah,
it
there
rather than the whole thing.
we know from like there's been a bunch of articles recently about Mappa and Netflix. Uh
Mhm.
and I guess when like an animator quit recently and caused a huge stink about like the work environment there and all that, and it got out a bunch of information about like what Netflix is paying the Japanese studios, and they're basically just paying the
Mhm.
same Japanese like the same budgets that they're used to in Japan. So like if they're comparing like an action show versus a slice of life, they'll probably just go with the Japanese studios, I think, just so they can pay the cheaper rate, I guess. I would
Yeah,
imagine.
the and I think that right now they're kind of focused on trying to bring in, um, I guess to an extent they're trying to convince certain like older audiences over into animation. And I think that like Castlevania is sort of an easy in for that, and shows like it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can kind of start branching out from there because they are seeing that because of like Castlevania and stuff like that. They're seeing folks who've never watched animation before getting into animation and then trying out other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which is really important. And so I'm not necessarily going to be pushy about like, whether or not they're going to jump into greenlighting other stuff because right now they're doing the important job of like getting folks who don't watch animation to start watching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I think that's cool.
I think they're betting a lot on animation too. So like I think they're expecting like I saw like there's a report that was published recently that was saying that anime industry is going to double in size by 2025 or something like that. And I
Hope they're
think like
gonna start bringing in more animators and
yeah,
hopefully paying them better in Japan.
yeah. I mean it's I think they're getting to the point where they can't do it anymore. Like it, it's pretty much well known now that everyone there's underpaid.
Yeah.
So like my studio still works under those rates, but most of our animators are not in the U.S. They're in like
Mhm.
Southeast Asia and stuff where like the rates aren't killer. But they
Yeah,
are we do have some like people in the U.S. and Canada and Europe, and they're all just either living with their parents or have a bunch of roommates or uh, doing
yeah,
things that they
exactly.
to save money because their pay is so low.
Yeah, they're expecting everyone to be working at the rates that they can get away with countries where the uh, currency converts to something like livable. Uh,
Yeah,
but like you
yeah. On the there's something
can't do that
that
like in
reminds me of something.
Japan, Tokyo or something.
Yeah, it reminds me of something I was going to mention earlier. The when we're talking about education, there are places where you can actually get educated in 2D animation in English, uh, but it's in Southeast Asia because in like the Philippines and Malaysia, uh, like South Korea, they're well actually yeah, Malaysia and the Philippines both have English as their major language, and the U.S. and Japan have been exporting animation to those countries for since the 80s. So there's like some schools and training programs over there, but
Yeah, that's
um,
interesting.
yeah. So we actually have a lot of people at Tonari that are from those places, and they learn like we didn't have to teach them anything. They weren't self-taught either. They learned from training programs in Southeast Asia. It's
Great.
kind of interesting.
Hmm.
Um, Vinicius is asking, "Hello, I love Castlevania, and it really inspired me to work on my draftsmanship. What do you think it is fundamental to have on a portfolio or reel in order to get an initial job?"
Um, so like I said, the strong draftsmanship will help you get a job uh, pretty well because you can do a lot of things with just being able to draw well and having a the sensibilities for the style of work at each studio. So obviously with Powerhouse, we have kind of the anime style work, and then we have like a little bit more like Western sensibilities for some of the other shows that we're working on. And so, that vein will get your foot in the door. But like I said, there's other things you can do um, to kind of get started, like being a production assistant, or you can do things that aren't necessarily drawing jobs that can still be creative, like compositing.
Mm-hmm. Patrick's wondering if you've talked about how you go about finding artisan animators yet. I don't think you have.
Um, Sometimes while I'm falling asleep in bed, I'm browsing Twitter.
Just scrolling through
Uh,
Twitter. Yeah, that's a good place to do it. That's where all the
uh,
like the anime animators are.
yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of artists on Instagram, but I've never seen animators there really.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I think that the social aspect of Twitter gets people to like share things around more, um, and makes it a little easier to stumble on things than what. I can find on other places. So unfortunately, Twitter is still kind of the strongest platform for that, for better or worse. And but there's other options. I mean, it's just browsing social media is a big part of it. Some folks actually apply through the website, and I'll stumble on them through there. Um, and some people just hit me up directly, uh, and I I'll go, oh, okay. Um, you wouldn't believe how many times I've clicked on someone's profile just because they had a pretty piece of art for their icon. So make sure your own art is your icon, and make sure it looks pretty, because maybe I'll click on it.
Yeah. Maybe Patrick's asking because maybe he's hinting that Masters of the Universe needs people.
Well, we've got several productions that need people, so
Yeah.
applying at Powerhouse in general, not just for the Castlevania spinoff, is we'll we've got dozens of open positions,
Mm-hmm.
and I've only got a few of them on my production. So
Are are you gonna get to work on that, or
yeah,
it's kind of crazy that He-Man's getting revived?
yeah, it's awesome, and
Yeah.
I've been able to bounce around and see the cool shit that those guys are doing, and I'm super proud of you guys.
Luffy is asking about if they can find those Malaysian schools online. Probably. I would say to be careful though, because I have had people tell me that there's scam schools there too. So
Dude.
they'll like train you for a bit and then get you to do animation work and then never pay you.
Oh man, that's
Yeah.
fucked up.
Um, let's see. Abel Salazar is asking, I'm looking at careers on Powerhouse website. I'd love to apply as an in-betweener, but is there no career over that for there? That would be
No,
the
we don't
closest thing
actually
is
have a
cleanup, right?
yeah, the cleanup and in between position. I don't know that we have a portal for that up there right now. But if you scroll down my Twitter, I actually have a post about it. So if you post it up there, I'll get the mention and see it. We did have a ton of folks apply, and so we're kind of like waiting through that, and not to mention the cleanup and in between supervisor was out for a few days, so we've been a little bit slow getting that ramped up. But yeah, that's if you post there, they will we'll see it.
Yeah, I recently put out a tweet for animators recently too, and I ended up with like I think over 100 people contacted me. Took me like forever to get to everybody. And like I wish I could have like responded to everybody and been like kind of direct them into the right place, say why I couldn't
Yeah.
accept
Right.
their portfolio or whatever, but it's just only so much time. So
Yeah, that can get rough. We had a character design position, or not a character design position. We had a character design portal open for multiple character design positions, and it hit something like 530 something applications,
wow.
and we were just like,
Yeah.
uh, and yeah, we need to work out a system with some of that getting like kind of passes, because going through 500 is a
I
lot.
know Toei used to do when they were doing hires, they used to do tests. Then they would review the
Yeah.
tests instead of doing just hiring from the portfolio.
Well, we don't want to necessarily like um uh, it- we test once we've whittled it down to the last few
Mm,
candidates,
okay.
typically, unless we've worked with someone before
Yeah.
or they are like
Like a
very well
freelancer.
established.
Yeah.
As an example, we hired Tam Lu without a test, but
Mm-hmm.
he had freelanced for us for a little while, and that was that for Katie Silva, our supervising character designer on Castlevania since season 3. uh, she actually painted the portraits uh, for the show that appear on some of the walls and stuff. And then I was like, "Well, do you want to do some freelance character design?" And she was like, "Okay." And then I was like, "Do you want to be full time?" And
Nice.
she was like, "Yeah." So she got out of school and then came straight over to working with us. So yeah, freelance is another way that we kind of like we'll test people out without necessarily like subjecting them to a test.
Yeah, I'm glad that there's a studio in the U.S. that's like providing full time work for uh,
Hmm.
traditional or like hand drawn animators. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
so
we're kind of reviving the uh, the animation industry a bit.
yeah, it's so common for uh, well, obviously, like in LA productions, they don't have a lot of actual animators working on a lot of those shows. Sometimes, depending on the studio, but um, but then at the same time, they have like kind of uh, this sort of revolving door where talent is kind of like coming in, then going out, and coming in,
Yeah,
and going out, and stuff. And we tried it. We're trying to be a studio that actually like hires people and then just keeps them, and
yeah,
they have job security forever and all that fun
yeah.
stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, and
That's the goal.
the way things are going, I can't imagine there being another like purge, because it seems like it's gonna be just smaller studios, kind of cropping up everywhere,
Yeah,
and then kind of
and we're seeing
reviving.
we're seeing a bit of that for sure, kind of everywhere, and that's really cool to me.
Um, JS, I don't know if you're allowed to answer this question, but are you allowed to say what the tests consist of once you get down to the final candidates?
Oh, it depends on the position. It's very different depending on it. So for previous Castlevania seasons, we've usually given people a set of existing boards that haven't been out there with a few of the character design sheets, and then say have at it, and we get back what we get back and look at it. But we may have to do something unique now that the whole series is out there. Um, and for design character designs, it's we'll ask someone to do like a model sheet based on a prompt in a specific style, and do it like that. Um, and for storyboards, we'll give someone a page or two to board.
Mm-hmm.
And some model sheets to work off of, and etc. Um, Compositing tests. Uh, I actually don't know what's in our compositing test now that I think about it. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while.
Is is compositing something that, because I have this impression that compositing positions are like extremely competitive, as like where it's like there's too
Um,
many
y-
compositors out there and it's really hard to actually get that position because
yes and no. The honest truth of the matter is that there's very few people that actually do compositing for 2D animation well.
yeah, yeah, I could see
For
that.
this style of work. We get a lot of portfolios where it's like very either very basic or it's all um, you'll get like some very simple motion graphics and stuff like that. So you don't really run into people who are gonna composite 2D animation out of the gate. You're usually getting a lot of folks that are doing all sorts of other things, and so you don't really it's actually kind of hard. We're always searching for kind of a diamond in the rough because it's very rare for us to come across someone that just like screams at us, "Oh, cool! They can do it like right out of the gate."
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, let's see. Andrews is asking. I think we'll just do a few more questions. We've been going for about an hour, 30 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. Um, Andres is asking, what is the most complicated thing about translating script to storyboards? And actually, there's a point too that I want to add to that for the question because I was curious about this too because the storyboards are really well thought out. Is there something like a preliminary like thumbnail sketch that gets created first, or do you guys go straight into those?
Yeah. So usually there's two stages to the boards. It'd either a rough board pass that is probably closer to what you
See an
would
anime,
be,
yeah,
yeah, what you'd be
yeah.
used to, and then we go over that. We usually pose things out more than the anime boards do, though. So the panel count is higher even on the roughs. Um, but when we get a script, um, what was the question?
Oh,
Most
what's the
complicated
complicated
thing?
thing about translating script to storyboard?
Um, it's I don't know. It's kind of hard to uh,
One thing that
think back on where when I was kind of like first getting into storyboarding versus where I'm at now. But it's I think um, a combination of making sure that you have an understanding of conveying the emotion in a scene, um, and knowing how to choose shots that will uh, land that, on
mm,
top of having to consider production. Um, so you're not only, especially in television production, you're not only just thinking about how to convey emotion in the best way possible. You are also having to think about um, how the entire production is going to go. Is it going to like how's how many pose changes do you have in here? How many drawings are we going to have to worry about with all of this? Um, and how does that look when you look at the entire rest of the episode? But usually when you're when I'm just like looking over a script and reading through it and everything, by then we've got character designs, we've got a set design, um, and it is kind of just about um, thinking about the emotion and how to convey it and
mm,
choosing your shots that way. And that's the best way to think about it, is just like reading through the script, trying to think about what emotion is needs to be conveyed. And honestly, I have kind of just a gut instinct when it comes to what shots I'm choosing for that. And I would be a terrible like teacher, uh, because I can't necessarily like give someone a technical reasoning behind
mm.
shot choices or anything like that. It is more
You're just
so
going on
like
the
I'm going on
intuition.
that intuition and the
Yeah,
the gut and everything.
I think
And
that's good.
I can talk to other board artists and be like, well, I think that um, you would want to do kind of like this sort of shot into this, maybe like bring the camera in slowly, blah blah blah. I can talk about it in those terms, um, and I can sort of explain why I feel that way in the moment, but not necessarily a like very like I don't know that I could explain the formula.
I think it's better to not know the formula. Like, I would be like personally afraid to learn it because then it might make everything too contrived and like
Yeah,
engineered. You know, like I've never
yeah,
been
I
a
guess
fan of like art appreciation and all that because it's like they're kind of I guess overly analyzing and like
yeah. I've always kind of
removing
enjoyed
the
that
art.
aspect of going with my gut. Is just like if I happen to land on something that has been done or something like that, it's not like I was thinking about it in a
Yeah,
formulaic sense or anything. But otherwise, it's just like I stumble on things as I go.
yeah.
When it comes to action boarding in particular, it's I know that some folks probably they crack open the Boru and dig through that and all that kind of stuff. But I don't really. I kind of avoid that. Every now and again, I like have to find some inspiration or something, but the boru comes in when I'm thinking about animation more so than when I'm storyboarding.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm more so trying to plot out the idea of the action and picking out shots based on that than I am um, looking for inspiration for how it plays out.
Yeah, I would imagine that you're working with screenplays, which something I found interesting about the anime industry is that they use prose or outlines to make their board like before they get to boards. Like they just have like a written story
Mhm.
that gets converted by the director into boards, or I guess sometimes they have storyboard artists, but
Yeah,
uh,
that would be more of a storyboard driven production
mm-hmm.
in that case,
Yeah,
which it's something that comes up in animation as well. But Castlevania is a script
yeah,
driven production, so we actually have all the
okay,
lines are spelled out. We have descriptions of the scenes and all that kind of stuff.
mm-hmm.
But we generally get a lot of flexibility when it comes to how things are staged, what the characters are emoting and stuff, and that is
Mm-hmm.
all just based on, um, you know, the intuition of the artist at the
Yeah.
time,
So
as well as the direction.
do the writers give you, or do they try to provide uh, shot composition notes, or are they leaving that up to you?
I've maybe received like uh, three instances where the writer had a specific shot in mind and
Mm.
wrote it into the script. And like in all 5 years is probably about it. It's
Wow.
like
Yeah,
three and
that's
three.
good because then
Yeah,
it leaves it up to the visual artist,
yeah.
which is
It's
beneficial.
I would say it's definitely more uh we get to inject more creativity than, for example, someone adapting a manga or something like that. Because for a manga, obviously, you're going to be pulling straight from the panels of the work of the original work, and as well as the designs and everything,
Yeah.
etc. For us, we're just getting some words on a screen, and
Mm-hmm.
we have to figure out how to you know design characters completely from scratch and all that fun stuff. And um, there's many elements that are um, you know the script just doesn't tell you what
Yeah.
what to do. And um, on top of that, like you have to make changes based on what you know about a situation or a setting, or just creative decisions that you discuss with the producers and stuff to enhance a situation. Like as an example, in season 4, um, spoiler alert, when Isaac goes to confront Carmilla, they originally weren't going to have a direct confrontation. They weren't going to have a direct fight,
Mm.
and it was going to be an indirect attack by Isaac's night creatures. And um, I was like, no, I would really want to see these opposing forces clash directly. And so we had a discussion with the producers, and they're like, yeah, we're on board. And so
Nice.
that whole fight was an unscripted thing that we went in and added because that moment, demanded it. It was my feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that they're flexible enough to allow that.
Yeah,
That's
it comes up. We get that kind of flexibility on. Usually the thing is add but don't subtract.
yeah, that's
So we can add to the script, but we just don't take anything away.
I think that's one of the reasons like Hayao Miyazaki when he makes his boards, he doesn't even start like he might have like a little like idea of what he's about to do, but then he just makes the whole story directly on the storyboards and just writes the whole
Crazy.
thing and draws it at the same time. Just and the reason he does it that way is because the characters will just kind of do whatever they're gonna do, and the scenes will just come as they come. So I think that's kind
It's
of like
so
a
interesting.
similar kind of thing. Is like if once you're in the story, you're like you feel like something has to happen. So
Yeah,
it's cool that
that's true. That's exactly true. I would be. It would be so interesting to just go in and create the story from the storyboards like that. I can't even
yeah.
really imagine. That seems incredible.
Yeah, it's like you gotta like know the character. You almost have to like know the characters intimately before you even touch the storyboard, because then you can like
Yeah,
they
I
just do
think
what they
that
do.
I think I would definitely process that through like actually writing out. I think I would process it
Yeah,
through. I don't think that's for me.
yeah. I think George R. R. Martin writes that way as well. He just
Just like
goes
starts writing scenes.
linearly,
Huh.
just goes straight to the end without any plans.
Well, folks, they're gonna work it with the way that connects the dots for their brains. So
Yeah. Okay, so we're hitting an hour 45. We'll do one more question and then wrap it up. Um, let's see. JS wondering how long did it take to board the Dracula and Alucard fight?
Dracula and Alucard fight. Let's see. It depends on whether the hallway, all the way through to when they burst into Alucard's childhood room. Um, so it's broken up a little bit because Amanda Citore, she did a couple of, she did the actual part with Alucard and Dracula in his childhood room. It was just brilliant, gorgeous work. Um, and she also did the part where they when they've busted into Hector's lab momentarily. But I did the section when when Alucard arrives in the study, up through to when uh, uh, Alucard stabs through the giant magma ball and forces Dracula through the wall, as well as the section. Um, Oh wait, and then I did the next section where they're fighting in the library, um, up till they get knocked into the ceiling. Amanda takes over, and then I take over again when they're fighting through the hallways, and they're in the engine room with the melting gears and stuff like that. I did that section, and then Amanda takes over again for the last part. Okay. Um, not enough time is probably the correct answer. Um, I think I had like for some of that stuff I was knocking them out in like a week or two in some cases because I was having to crank through it and I took on way too much. Um, and I think I remember I boarded the fight in the hallway in like a week and a half, but it was a really rough week and a half. And then the section afterwards, um, I actually went through several versions of that, and I just wasn't. I was struggling to land it. The section where they're fighting through the hallways and they end up in the engine room, and I did a few different versions of that, and um, I the last version that I did, I think I did in a night. And I was down to the wire. I think that was the last thing that was bored in the whole episode. And I was like, I've got to figure out what to do with it. And then something finally clicked for me, and I was like, okay, this is it. And then I cranked through it in one long night.
So, something that I'm kind of curious about too is when you're boarding, do you just kind of like do you read through the script and then you just kind of sit there and try to imagine it, or do you have to actually like doodle on paper in order to figure it out?
Um,
Or is it kind of like
Typically,
combination?
well, it's I never draw on paper, so I'll say
Mm,
that at first. I'm pure digital. Um, I If I'm working on an unscripted action sequence, I typically have to I go through and I write out what I like, kind of an general idea of the how the fight will play out. So I
mm,
kind of write it, and then I go through and I visualize each of the shots and write down what I'm visualizing for each of those cuts. And so I go through and I write that out. Then I go through and do a quick thumbnail pass based on what each of those beats that I've written out. And then I kind of like start to add and subtract shots and mess with it from there. And then I get into the meat of the
mm-hmm,
storyboarding. It's not too dissimilar for drama sequences, but usually for those, we usually have. I'll usually go straight into drawing for those. I'll just
mm-hmm.
start sketching out my shots and stuff.
Okay.
Hey, I've got a cat attacking me now.
All right. Well, yeah, I think that's the last question. So, yeah, thanks for coming on. I think that was really interesting of a conversation. Um,
Yeah, but thanks for having me.
yeah.
This is fun.
Um, by the way, thanks everyone that came to watch this live. I'm sure it's more engaging to see live. I see a lot of people comment after these get done. They're like, "Oh, I missed it." So, anyways, a reminder: Powerhouse is hiring. So if you guys just came in at the end here, uh, you guys should definitely
Yep.
check out their openings. Tonari Animation's actually also hiring, but we're just looking for background painters. Who we're trying to get people that can paint in a. These people are like really hard to find. That can paint in like, uh, almost like the traditional anime background style,
Oh
as
yeah.
opposed to like I think lately a lot of people are kind of working with photo bashing and uh, more like concept looking stuff. Or
Hmm.
if people have experience as background painters, they're on like really cartoony shows. So it's like, um,
Makes
so
it harder.
we're still looking for that. If you guys know have like a solid background painting uh skills, like we're like landscapes and stuff like that, architecture, you can send your portfolios to my email, which is on my Twitter. Okay. Anyways, thanks everybody.